Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be going over another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for Standard Best of 1. We'll cover Standard Best of 3 later in the week. For the other formats, Historic and Explore. Historic will probably wait a week, given that Lord of the Rings is coming out on Arena on Tuesday, so we'll see if any of those cards make it to the format. Lord of the Rings is not legal in Explorer, so we'll cover Explorer this week as well. I'll probably do an Alchemy video later this week just to see how the Lord of the Rings cards are fitting into that format as well. If you're looking for Lord of the Rings content, I participated in the early access event, so I got some videos of gameplay already up. Mostly Alchemy, just given the early access was Alchemy, but I do have a demonstration of the new Infinite Samwise combo with Cauldron Familiar. It's Infinite Life Gain, so that's up on the channel as well, so definitely check that out. And before we jump into the details, just want to say thank you. We hit 9,000 subs on the YouTube channel. Appreciate all the support. We did have the goal of 10K by the end of June. It's 12 days left. We can see if we can make it, but I do appreciate the support. Subscribing to the channel is free, easy, and helps continue the content coming out. So we'll jump into it. We are looking at Untapped GG as always for our data set. It's a companion tool that tracks win rate data from users. You can track your win rate, aggregates it as part of all the user community, and gives us these stats. Link is in the video description if you want to get started, but I'll also paste all these deck lists with timestamps so you can skip ahead. So we're looking June 11th through the 18th, Diamond to Mythic rank, 79,000 games of Magic played. Because it's like mid-month, we can start looking Diamond to Mythic. We start getting the stats itself. In terms of the meta itself, folks were asking for this, so we'll kind of take a look. So we can look at the meta from May 9th through to the 18th, so a little bit more than a month. They usually do like from a set. So don't worry so much about the win rate today. We're looking at popularity. And what we're going to try to see is, are decks being overrepresentative in terms of their win rate. So the top played decks are Mono Red, Selesnya, Mono White, Mono Red Burn, Azorius Control. Mono Blue Tempo is actually the 6th played deck. And looking at Mono Blue Tempo, they had a sub 50% win rate when I was looking at it. The top 3 decks are actually the top 3 in terms of win rates as well for this week. Which we'll cover in terms of the deck lists themselves. So in terms of Standard right now, the proportion of decks being played to win rates, there is a correlation. There is very low to the ground aggro, so if there is ways to kind of combat that with things like an Azorius Control deck, we'll take a look at things with life gain, things with sweepers, might be a consideration to attack the best of 1 meta. So interesting kind of stats over there. Untap's really cool because you can track like all the popularity and stuff. See, like at one point, like when the new set dropped, this is probably when Calyx came out, around that time, a little bit earlier, like Selesnya Enchantments was 23% of the meta, so we've seen a decline with it, with Mono Red being fairly stable throughout that time frame. So top performing deck of the week is Mono White Humans, 63% win rate. So this one's only got 120 game sample size, but I'm going to compare it to a second list as well. So the other version's got 1,800 games played with a 59% win rate. So about 3-4% difference. The biggest kind of difference between is this list is playing full for Surge of Salvation in the main. So this gives protection, you and permanents you control gain hexproof time of turn. So it's always got text in the sense that it could kind of protect you against single target or removal, stuff like that. But you also get to prevent all damage that black or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So it can be used even, like we saw Mono Red being very popular. They attack in with their creatures, you block, you Surge of Salvation, you protect your board, and then their creatures don't deal any damage to yours. So you can kind of win that creature trade battle and then attack in. So interesting to see that this is usually like a sideboard card in best of 3 coming into the best of 1 format. This version of the deck has got kind of a mono white soldier sub-theme. So it's an interesting configuration where both the lists will have Recruitment Officer, Hopeful Initiate. This version's also on Skrelv. But this particular list here is going to have the Resolute Reinforcements as well as Valiant Veteran package. So you still have Soldier with Copper Coat Vanguard, but the Vanguard also pumps up your humans. Your only non-human in the deck is the Valiant Veteran. So it's kind of a dual Lord situation. So it's an interesting kind of configuration. You do have Thalias in here, you have Brutal Cathars, as well as Ossification for removal, Adeline as your other 3-drop, full 4 Mishra's Foundry, 2 Aganjos in the mana base. We compare it to the other mono-white aggro deck. You have your Skrelves, Guardian of Nubenalia, Intrepid Adversary serves as your second lord. It is a little bit more of a mana commitment because you are paying up to 4. You need 4 mana to get the boost in terms of power, but this doesn't care about the creatures that you're playing. This version's also on the Knight Errant of Eos, so for card advantage. So it's kind of interesting. Like the core strategy is the same: aggressive white creatures that attack in. The ways they're going about it is a little different, so it's kind of interesting to see how that plays out. So I'll link both these lists if you want to give them a shot to see. This has obviously got a lot larger sample size at 1,800 games, but folks might be onto something with this like mono white version of the deck. So what I'll do is I'll timestamp this one, and then this one I'll just paste it as a secondary deck list at the bottom so you can get access to it since we spoke about them together. The mono red aggro deck, there's a couple different versions, but usually the ones with like the creature package over the burn version do a little bit better just because it's sustained damage. So the full Squee, the full Thundering Raiju, the mechanized warfare versions, because you're paying 3 mana to just do nothing for the turn, typically is a little rough. Since a 62% win rate, what we're seeing is an inclusion of 2 Strangles. Strangle's really nice because it gives you now 10 removal spells to deal with kind of the creature mirrors, and they're all really efficient removal spells. Where if you look at the mono white deck, they're paying 2 to 3 mana for the removal spells, and then like Brutal Cathar can be interacted with. This is, 6 2 mana and then some 4 mana removal 4 2 mana removal spells that come in. Then it's just efficient creatures. Swift Sphere gets bigger, Phoenix Chick's recursive, Kumano pings and then gives a boost. Feldon, Adversary lets you flashback as well. Then you have your big creatures on the top end. The only thing I typically don't like with these decks is the 3 Mishra's Foundries. Because you're on such a volume of 3-drops, when you have this as your second land, of 1-drops, you can't play out usually 2 1-drops on turn 2 with this. I prefer just trimming this number down, playing another swamp. Another mountain. All over the place with this mono red deck today. We then go to Selesnya Enchantments, 59% win rate, 2,000 games played. Again, this deck's got a couple variations. You could go the more mid-range Hallowed Haunting version. That version was better against the Rakdos, like heavy removal decks. This more linear aggro deck tends to be a little bit better into the creature mirrors. This deck is a little soft into like if you run into any of the ramp packages because they have Sunfall, and with this deck you have to commit to the board as opposed to mono red, which just has reach through burn. But the core of the deck, you got Calyx that puts counters onto things whenever you cast an enchantment or when an enchantment enters the battlefield. And then you get to copy enchantments when Calyx or an equipped creature gets damage through. So the kind of combo is like Audacity because it gives trample. You can make something big and then make copies of Audacity or make other copies of things like Jukai Naturalist or your Mashikos to get power boost or card advantage or removal or Weaver of Harmony to double up triggers. You have Generous Visitor that pumps up your team along with Kami of Transience, which gets bigger. And then you have some Skrells for protection in there. Commune with Spirits is some card advantage as well. The one thing I find with this deck is people play quite a limited number of lands. You do need 3 to 4 mana often. I was playing 22, 23 lands. Like I got to top 1200 last month with this deck. I would probably trim a Calyx, play 3, and then just play an additional land. You do need to hit your land drops because like this wants at least 3 mana to double up the triggers. We then go to Naya Humans at 59% win rate. So similar to the mono white version. So it's a humans tribal deck. So you still have your Copper Coat Vanguards in there, your Thalias, but you get access to Malira, which is kind of a protection spell for your other creatures. So if you have things like Adeline, which is more important, like a bigger threat, Halana and Alana, stuff like that, you could bring them back if they die. Halana and Alana is another payoff for going in multicolor. Pumps up your team. Any creature you draw becomes a big threat. And then it gets to pump through and give haste to creatures. You have a couple lords with Sigarda, Champion of Light, which gives you the boost to your human creatures, as well as with Coven, if you have 3 different powers, you can get some card advantage. You also have Sigarda, Font of Blessings, another kind of angel-human synergy card. So it gives your other permanents hexproof, so it gets to play around removal, and then you get to play angels or humans from the top of your library. Brutal Cathars, Peacekeepers for tax, Adeline, and then some Valor Stance as removal. Get rid of those pesky Atraxas, but also protect your stuff. You're able to play the off-color humans, in part because Secluded Courtyard, as well as Plaza of Heroes. We then have a return of Selesnya Toxic. Hasn't showed up in a couple weeks, but always kind of there in the background. So this version here, you still got your Rot Priest. It's not like the Ivy versions where you're kind of all based in the Rot Priest. Fell Stinger is kind of a pseudo lord that lets you attack in and give a boost to your creatures. Skrelv Hive is really nice to get just for redundancy. Keep making new creatures. Bloated Contaminator as a way to proliferate and just get chunk damage in. Annex Sentry as removal, as well as some ossifications. Safekeeping, Tyvar Stance with 6 protection spells paired up with Skrelv as well. And then you have your creatures. So, interestingly, this version's not on the Myrex, just the Seed Core. I'd probably try to find space for a Myrex. That card's really good in the grindy games because you just keep making pressure, especially with Skrelv Hive. Then you start gaining some life back as well. You then go to Mono Black Control, Mono Black Midrange. So kind of Bankbuster's gone, Invoke's gone. So let's go more creature focused. So we see return of like the Tenacious Underdog, Sleepers in here, Liliana's in here. I'm always like iffy with Liliana in these types of decks because your curve's so high that you end up discarding your own cards that you want, especially like this deck's only playing 24 lands. Should be playing more lands. I'd cut 2 Lilianas, play an additional land, and then just play like a Gix. It'd probably be my guess. Play like a Myrex in the mana base. But you're using like Life of Toshiro as a way to deal with early creatures, can gain you some life. So even if it's like gain 4 life over 2 turns and then you get a 2/3, that can help you ramp into Gix Control, which is Gix Command, which is a sweeper. Cut downs, go for the throats, Shieldred's Edict as removal spells. In this format in best of 1, you're probably better off just playing more Go for the Throats. If you look at a lot of these creature decks, they go wide. So just forcing them to sack a creature is not always the best. If we look at the top 3 decks right now, none of them are playing Planeswalkers, so it doesn't really matter. Like, you want to hit a Calyx, for example. That's like a big, scary card. You don't really care about killing some of the smaller creatures. Trespasser's nice for life gain. Obliterator against like mono red. There's some exile in mono white, but like this is a very big threat for the aggressive decks. Shieldred gains you life. Invasion of Zendikar is some removal, and then other Shieldred on the top end. But yeah, I think this deck, based on the curve, needs a 25th land, and you're minusing Liliana against like mono red. You're gonna hit like a Phoenix Chick. You're playing a 3 mana spell to kill a 1/1. We then go to Azorius Control. So this is what I was mentioning, like there's ways to kind of approach the meta. This one's an interesting one. Don't necessarily agree with the win condition per se, but you have like Sunset Revelry, which I think is a really well-positioned card right now. If you look at all those aggressive decks, they're going to deal damage to you early so you can gain the 4 life. You can then also get 2 1/1s, which are good at blocking, so you get some utility with that. You got Elspeth's Smite that deals 3 damage to attacking or target creature, which is nice. So 1 mana removal spell. Mending gains you life. You got Fateful Absence as removal, some counter spells. Moment of Truth is like an anticipate card. So this version here is looking to put cards into your graveyard, and then you're able to unearth the Terizian Mindbreakers. So this is like Azorius Mill. So you're basically getting this back from your graveyard for 4 mana. When it attacks, the player mills half their library. So you can take out big chunks of their library and then just play a Jace, and then with the minus ability, mill out the remaining amount of cards. You have sweepers with Depopulate, Sunfall, and Farewell, and then you have utility lands in the Myrex kind of mixed into there. So blue-white mill, interesting take on the deck. So that's it for the week. Like I said, when I was looking at the decks, we see mono blue be very popular. There's a bunch in like Soldiers actually dropped off quite a bit. It's like 54% this week, where last week it was like one of the top decks. I don't think there's any soldiers. Yeah. Soldiers dropped all the way down to 54%. There's like Esper Legends is in like the 55%. Like this Demir Mill deck occasionally pops up, but I think it's a little slow for best of one. I think the Azorius Control decks are reasonable. There's like another take here with like Wandering Emperor, Farmhand, just a lot of removal kind of mixed into there. I think just this version playing Sunset Revelry can be decent. Gives you some more, like another Soldiers deck, pretty low, but the ramp decks are like low 50s, like the 5-color domains 50, Jeskai Dragons 50, and then like Mono Blue Tempo, which we saw was the 6th most played deck. So people are playing the Tempo deck because it's likely a cheap deck to play, but 48% win rate, so not the best deck in the format itself. But let me know what you're playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone.